For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sanel Dlamini. Fred Platt joins me to discuss his book titled Lesson from a Rainbow Unicorn, a real-life story of a father's loss. Welcome, Fred, and thank you for your time. This is your first book which deals with the sad passing of your son Sam due to a life-limiting disease. Can you briefly tell us about Sam's story?
Yeah, Sam was born on the 9th of April and in 2015, and he was born with a life-limiting illness, but we spent 15 and a half months in hospital and in ICU, so his entire life. 13 and a half of those months were spent in Johannesburg at a private hospital. 2 months were spent in Cape Town, and then the last week of his life was spent at the Red Cross Children's Hospital, which is a government hospital in Cape Town. And he passed away on the 22nd of July 2016. So 15 and a half months.
Yeah. You start the book with a very emotional poem dedicated to him. It must have been hard dealing with his loss. Tell us about what prompted you to write this book.
Well, I think a couple of things. But the first thing is I wrote the book for myself because having dealt with it and being so engaged for 15 and a half months and just dealing with the challenges on the daily basis. What do we have to do? How do we deal with this? How do we deal with that? You know, your whole life gets disrupted. You're sitting in hospital. You spend eventually, you know, even till today, if I start my car, my GPS tells me how long it'll take to get to the hospital. You know, it's that type of thing. And then Sam passes, and then you got to take stock because, you know, I think in the book I did say your true north shifts, and all of a sudden you need to take stock. So that was the motivation. And then I think also just dealing with how a father maybe deals with loss, as opposed to there's a lot of people that write about how to deal with loss, but very few fathers.
Exactly, yeah. And he was born on a very important day. You were supposed to say farewell to the two important men that were part of your business. Can you tell us about that day?
Yeah, we, you know, being a businessman and the CEO of a company, you have these things. And on that particular day, we had a farewell function for our chairman, who'd been a friend and a mentor and been with us for many, many years, as well as our group treasurer, who was in a very similar position. We'd invited in excess of 100 guests, and it was just crazy because, you know, Sam was only due in 2 months' time, and that call that morning just kind of floored me because, you know, it was maybe the start of this journey, because all of a sudden you realized that your life, the way you've ordered it, the way that you've structured it, is not going to happen. And that was, I suppose, the first of many lessons.
And you also say that he taught you to love unconditionally and to know what is truly valuable. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think before you have a child, you're quite selfish. And I was probably the most. And all of a sudden, you have this little boy who, you know, the first time I touched him in the hospital and held him, which was after quite a while, you know, my life just changed. And all of a sudden, you know, things like going to a hospital. If people were in hospital, I didn't like hospitals, so I would actually tell them, I'm sorry, I don't really like hospitals, so I'll see you. And, you know, so you kind of structure your life. And then I spent 15 and a half months in hospital every day. But understanding value was critical for me, because you attach so much value to so many things. And when Sam died in my arms, at that moment, I would have swapped everything that I had, every single thing, for one more day. And that gave me a relative understanding of value.
Yeah. I'm sure you will agree, because you're also familiar with KZN and maybe a bit of Zulu culture. Because from where I come from, men, they always wished to have a son. But at first you had a wish to have a daughter. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was bizarre. Now, let me start off first. I was never going to get married, so I was going to be a bachelor all my life.
I remember that too.
And so, but my wife just changed that in an instant. And, when I met her, I'd held out for 44 years.
Even
very
your PA was like, she's the one.
Exactly. And we just knew. So, I never wanted. And then the thought of having a child, I wasn't sure about that. But, as we went through this process, the idea of having a little princess that I could look after and was really appealing. And I just thought it would be a girl. But then obviously, once I knew it was a boy, I think all of those instincts kicked in.
Yes, you also had ideas of what you would do with him. Yeah, you also say that the challenges you faced while you were building your business, you saw them as a mere dress rehearsal, if I may say. Can you tell us more about that?
I suppose the first kind of 40 years of my life, nothing could go wrong. Everything just worked. Everything I touched, everything, everything was just easy. And then we started having some challenges in the business. We went through a hostile shareholding situation for 5 years. And for the first time in my life, really, from the time I turned 40, you started understanding what life is really about, and also the type of challenges that people face. And that last week, I think, just opened up that understanding of humanity for me so much more.
And it must have been hard for your wife as well.
Yeah, it was. She's the most amazing woman on earth. She's the most amazing person. And her dedication to Sam was just legendary. She spent every wake moment with her. I think in the 15 and a half months she was away from him for 3 days. But she dedicated her entire life to him. And she did that willingly, but of course it was difficult.
What do you mean when you say that the lessons that were crucial in your business also helped you to cope?
Yeah, I think one thing that you again start experiencing is that you don't have business and life, you live.
Yeah.
And sometimes we separate those two parts of our life. We have different identities, and we are this person, and then we go away on holiday, and then we are who we really are. And I think what we learned through this whole process was the lessons we learn in business we can adapt to or implement in our life, but vice versa. Our personal journey can hugely impact on how we view business and how we view people and how we view what is important.
Yeah. Are you also hoping that maybe some parents who might be going through the same ordeal will get something from this book?
Absolutely. I think the one thing that as a parent, when we meet and we deal with many parents through we have a support group and we have a foundation, so we deal with many parents that have lost. The first thing is there's an immediate connection. There's two important things. Every child is now my child. So if I see a child, everyone becomes yours. But the second thing is every parent that has lost a child has become my friend, and I have a deep understanding of what they're going through. So hopefully this book can also assist them in that journey.
There was a touching moment in the book when, like you've told us earlier, that you only had an opportunity to hold Sam in your hands after a while. Can you tell us about that moment?
Yeah, it was an amazing moment because for the first couple of months, Sam was just full of pipes, full of tubes, lying in bed, and we weren't really sure if we could touch him, and we were never really encouraged and everything else. And then as Sam progressed, because in the first part of his journey, he progressed quite well, and every month was a milestone, and eventually we got to a stage where I could hold him, and yeah, my life will never be the same again.
You also addressed the fact that you were not satisfied with the medical professionals, which shocked me because he was in a I can imagine maybe not a government hospital, and the horror stories that we always hear in government hospitals. Can you briefly tell us what was going on at the hospital?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that we when you spend 13 and a half months in hospital, every day, all the time, you start seeing and understanding that world a lot better. And I think what really struck us was the lack of support, the lack of empathy, the lack of cohesive communication with everyone. So, you would have one message from one medical professional, another one from another. We had diagnoses over the time, one after the other, that proved to be wrong. We had huge infighting between the medical professionals. We saw how some of the nursing staff were treated. We saw all these challenges. Now, ironically, some of the best experiences that we had was in a government hospital, where we really saw how it could be done. So I don't think it's as simple as saying, private hospital is good and government is bad. Some of the best facilities and best understanding and best care that we have subsequently seen has been in government hospitals, but also in private hospitals where people understand that it's about the patient. And the patient is not just the disease, it's a holistic patient. And not only the patient, because in our case it's Sam, but it was also Melissa and myself. It was also our extended family, because you can't divorce the experience. We were in that experience, engaged as a family for the whole time.
Now, talk to parents who might be going through maybe a similar situation. What can you tell them?
Well, a couple of things. I think the first and most important thing is just live in the moment. Just be with your child. Just love your child. Sometimes you get so caught up in the disease, in the symptoms, in dealing with all of this. If I look back and think, there were maybe so many times that I was so worried and Googling and everything else, where I could have maybe just held him, just been with him. And the other thing to understand is that it's in your hands. If you feel you're not getting the care, get a second opinion. It's your right, but it's also your responsibility towards your child. But at the end of the day, it's really just about, and we advocate for creating a conducive environment where healthcare professionals, where the holistic child is dealt with, the symptoms, the parents, the family, the spiritual aspect, the psychological trauma, all of that needs to be dealt with, and it's also important for families that are going through this to find that support, to look for that support, and to make sure, because you can't give if you yourself are under pressure.
And tell us about the footprint for Sam, the foundation that you are currently running with your wife.
Yeah, we started in a foundation, which is a trust, with very, very high levels of governance. And the trust focuses on two main areas. I always say I made two promises to Sam in his life. The first was that I would give him the best possible chance, and the second one was that we would ensure that his legacy lived on. And the trust is that. So we have two focus areas, one of which is advocacy. So we address medical students, doctors, we address congresses, and we just want to make sure that patient-centered healthcare becomes central. And we're dealing with major hospital groups, so there's a lot of that. On the other hand, while we were in Red Cross Hospital, and there were parents who didn't have bus fare to visit their sick and dying children. And when we left there, we made a promise that no child would die in that hospital because a parent didn't have bus fare. So we've put a vehicle down in Cape Town, and that vehicle makes sure that parents are able to see their children. It makes sure that children with chronic illnesses are able to get to the hospital. And then it also makes sure that if a child dies, that parents don't have to get into a taxi, and that they get taken home in dignity. So that is an important component. We're discussing that. We also run a feeding program, because very often after 12 months in hospital, the parents go home to a house where there's no food. So we run a program for that, and we've got fantastic sponsors, T-Systems and Hertz with the vehicle. And we're also doing, we're also launching a data program so that we can put Wi-Fi in hospitals, so that parents and children can FaceTime each other. And they can also talk to the doctors. Sam and I had a very, very special relationship on FaceTime. And so that's an important component for us. And then there's a couple of other programs that we're running.
And lastly, tell us about people who might want to buy the book. Where can they get this book?
The book is available at Exclusive Books. It's also available at a host of other leading bookstores. It is also available on Amazon.com in Kindle format.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fred, for your time.
Thank you.
That was Fred speaking to Polity about his book titled Lessons from a Rainbow Unicorn, a real-life story of a father's loss.